So the Toronto Maple Leafs have given a 2-year extension to the Toronto Marlies head coach, that's their AHL affiliate, Sheldon Keefe. Now, this is a lot bigger news than just a simple flyer on the side. And because to most insiders, journalists, Leaf fans, speculators, Keefe is the heir apparent to the head coaching duties of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And you're like, what? What are you talking about? Mike Babcock's there right now. What, are you writing him off already after 4 years? Well, and I do realize, of course, Kyle Dubas just not even a month ago just resonated his trust in Babcock and how he'll be back for next season. But Dubas never hired Babcock. He inherited him. Now, before we get more into that, let's go over a little bit of history of Keefe, because that's important. Now, he's been coaching the Toronto Marlies for the last 4 years. The 38-year-old has a record of 189, 87, 20, and 1, and holds a franchise record for most wins and highest winning percentage, and won the Calder Cup with them last year in 2018. That's the Stanley Cup in the AHL. Now, prior to joining the Marlies in 2015, he coached the OHL Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds, where Kyle Dubas, President of Toronto Maple Leafs GM, was GM for 2 to 3 years. He was there. Keefe, in 2 full seasons with the Greyhounds, coached them to a 98-29, 0-2 record, and won Coach of the Year in the OHL and the CHL in 2014-15. Prior to the OHL, the Brampton, Ontario native served as a head coach and the GM of the CCHL's Pembroke Lumber Kings, where he won 5 straight league titles and an RBC national title in 2011. That's not all, because Keefe used to play. He was a 5'10", 185-pound right winger who was originally drafted by the Tampa Bay Lightning in 1999, second round, 47th overall, where he played 125 NHL games and 120 AHL games. So basically, this guy sounds like the next John Cooper, really, without the law degree, but I realize that, but he's the next big thing coming out of the AHL. And he's been in demand. The Leafs have had calls about him and have stipulated how he's not going anywhere. And Keefe has said how he doesn't want to go anywhere. For the time being, it's important that he continues on his learning trajectory and developing young players for the Toronto Maple Leafs. For the time being. That was a little snippet that came out of an interview with the Toronto Star a little while back. So back to Mike Babcock. Now, what's he in his 5th season right now with the Toronto Maple Leafs? He's now gone to the playoffs and lost in the first round 3 times in a row. First year Babcock was here, the team was awful, finished in last, we all know about that. Second year, no one expected them to make the playoffs, and they did. And that's when they faced the Washington Capitals. So you can maybe give Babcock a little leniency there, because although they only took the Capitals to 6 games, I want to say 3 or even 4 of those games were in overtime. The Leafs gave the Capitals all they could handle. And then, of course, we all know they lost to the Bruins in the first round the next 2 years, including this one. So the talk is that Babcock's got maybe a year left. And according to this extension of Sheldon Keefe, he has maximum 2 years. That's 4, not 4. 2. He has maximum 2 more years to make something of it. So, yeah, I mean, you can also say, well, why don't they bring him up as an assistant coach, right? Because the Leafs have basically fired their 2 assistant coaches from last season. Well, they didn't fire them, excuse me. DJ Smith was hired as the new head coach of the Ottawa Senators, which I put out a video on. You can check it out my playlist not too long ago. And DJ Smith ran the penalty kill and defense. Jim Hiller, who wasn't technically fired, but was told that he could go explore jobs elsewhere. It's a nice way of saying, we're not bringing you back. I believe Nashville was interviewing him at one point, and there's one other team. He was the power play and forward guy in charge of the forwards. So Leafs went out and got Paul McFarland. Just recently, in fact, formerly the assistant coach of the Florida Panthers. I did a little video on that just a day or two ago as well. You'll find that as well on my playlist. Paul McFarland, of course, is a young guy. I want to say he's around 33 or so years old. But he was in charge of the power play in Florida, which was ranked number 2 during the regular season. Now, because Florida hired Joe Quenneville, they basically cleaned house. McFarland became, I don't know, I was going to say prisoner of war, a casualty of war, so to speak, and Toronto just pounced on him as soon as he became available. So Paul McFarland is filling in for Jim Hiller's spot, but they still need someone to fill in for DJ Smith's spot in terms of the PK and running the defense. So some insiders have talked about how, well, why not bring Keefe up here so he can be the assistant coach, even if he's like a third assistant coach, to help train him and blah, blah, blah. Because there is an argument out there amongst journalists that who also happen to be former players, coaches, etc., that it's integral for a future head coaching head coach of the NHL to have some experience as an assistant coach, so he knows what to demand of his assistant coaches once he becomes a head coach. Man, my head is dizzy already. So, but there's still a lot of coaches out there who have been an assistant coach at one point or another. But the funny thing is, Sheldon Keefe never has. He's always been just a head coach. He's never been an assistant coach. But, I mean, are you going to hold that against the guy when he's got such an amazing record? Like the one I just mentioned? I don't think so. I think this guy's opportunity is coming up soon. It's just not going to be as the assistant. Mike Babcock has a big say in who is going to be a replacement for DJ Smith. And the word on the street is that he wants maybe at least a former assistant or a former head NHL coach to fill that position. More of a veteran guy. Especially seeing as how Paul McFarland is a little young, and that job that he had in Florida was his first in the NHL. So Keefe isn't coming up to be an assistant coach. That is highly unlikely. So, and plus, imagine if you brought up Keefe to the bench. It would be, like Babcock looking down to his, to his heir apparent all the time. It would just cause way too much drama, and it would fill the newspapers every day. The journalists would love it in Toronto, but it would cause heartache for Dubas and Babcock and probably Keefe as well. It would be a little bit of a mess. Tensions would be high, nonetheless. So this is just a little something for Sheldon Keefe to say, here, 2 more years. Just stick around for 2 more years. We want to bring you up. This is Dubas. I'm playing Dubas's role here, if you haven't noticed. Just give us 2 more years. Give me 2 more years to get rid of Babcock, and we'll bring you in. So, because it's talked about how Babcock and Dubas have been butting heads about the style of play and the players he uses and where he puts them in the lineup. For instance, putting Ron Hainsey on the first matchup defense core as opposed to the third pairing, and so on and so on and so forth. Now, Keefe has done an amazing job at developing prospects. Some of them that are on the team right now who are doing really well, for example, are Andreas Johansson, Kasperi Kapanen, and Travis Dermott, just to name a few. So there you are. As always, I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions on this whole matter in the comment section down below. Hit like if you like this video. Smash that subscribe button if you haven't already. And hey, if you happen to have any Hockey Geek friends, please don't feel shy about sharing. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.